On Story, presented by Austin Film Festival. Welcome to a look behind the scenes of the creative process with some of the film industry's most prolific writers, directors, and producers, as well as a showcase of short films from the region's most promising filmmakers.
There's a wonderful British writer called Martin Amos, and he went to the set of RoboCop 2, which was shooting in Detroit, and he went there for a newspaper to report on it. And there's this phrase he uses about filmmaking when you look at it from the outside, and he said it's a series of delays interrupted by repetitions. And I thought that's the best thing I've ever read about what filmmaking is like from somebody watching it from a distance.
I found the book up in the air 7 years ago. I had written Thank You for Smoking and nobody would make it. No studio, no mini major, no nothing. And I started looking for something else, and I walked into a bookstore, and there it was. It was a paperback with a flight attendant on the cover. There was a quote by Christopher Buckley right there on it, and I thought, oh, I'll probably like this, and I did. I fell in love with it. And I actually began to write it back then. And I got about 30 pages in when my agent got a call from a guy who was an internet millionaire. He was one of the creators of PayPal. He and his partners had sold PayPal to eBay for $1.5 billion. He had some extra cash. I put down Up in the Air, made Thank You for Smoking. After Thank You for Smoking, I went back, I wrote another 30 pages of it. I spent a year making Juno, and when that was done, I finally came back and started finishing Up in the Air, the screenplay. Now, I changed over that time. You know, when I first started writing this script, I was a single guy living in an apartment, and over the course of those 6-7 years, I met my wife. I became a father. I got a mortgage. And I began to learn, at least for me, what was important in life. My life gathered weight, and so did this screenplay. So much so that the first time I reread it after 6 years, it was like watching myself grow up. And in fact, I began to kind of live through the character of this movie.
The film was all shot in the house I grew up in. Part of the thing I did when I was writing the screenplay, or when I had the initial idea that I wanted to, do some sort of romantic drama that took a look at these three siblings, I listed the locations that I could get for free. Originally, I thought the whole film would be set in Manhattan, but the only location that I could get repeated access to was my parents' house. The other thing is, when you see the film, all these couples in New York, anytime they go on a date, it's in a park. And that's because I didn't need any lights, and you don't have to pay for the permit to shoot in any of the parks in New York City.
Your apartment? No, he doesn't live in New York.
Really?
Well, let me ask you another semi-personal question.
Well, you can ask it, but I can't guarantee you're gonna get an answer.
All right, that's fair. Why would you agree to go on a blind date with me if you're already engaged to this Henry the horse farmer?
Because I'm not happy in that relationship, and I don't want to sell myself short.
And then we did The Beach, which is a big budget film, and it isn't a Hollywood film in the sense that we made it in Hollywood. We made it in Thailand, and we made it from our own book and in our own way, and with the total support of like a big movie star, Leo. But it didn't really suit me. Mm-hmm. And those kind of budgets, 50 million, doesn't really suit me. I was saying to some journalists this morning, like where I come from, $50 million would pay to move my whole town 100 miles to the west or to the east, depending on your whim. It's like staggering amount of money, and I've never really been comfortable with that scale of money. So since then, I've tried to work with more limited budgets, which you try and stretch as much as possible, which I find very creative. I don't resent the fact that you haven't got enough money for equipment or a big star or whatever. I kind of try and use what there is and make it as big as possible of itself, Like, we didn't have very much money, so we didn't have a crane. So the shot I don't know whether you remember, it's a shot where it follows the blood drop down into his eye. That's built, this rig is built out of wood by this guy, this grips guy called John Rundle. And, you know, without him, we'd have never made it like that. But he worked nights and hours, special hours, building this rig, like a little jerry rig with rubber bands, basically, and bits of wood to create this effect. I was always interested in that, in the eyes and drops in the eyes and things like that. I guess it probably comes out of that. You know, and it is infection-wise, it is an incredibly vulnerable place, and it's our sight, and, you know, so I loved it for that reason, I guess.
Graduate is one of the films I saw in film school that made me fall in love with movies. It's the reason why most of my films, the way Mike Nichols used Simon and Garfunkel, you know, use one artist and pop songs and then extract the melody or instrumental versions as the score. You know, I did that with Tom Petty on She's the One. The guy does all the music now for me, P.T. Walkley. That's what we're always trying to do. But we were shooting the scene in the pool with Matt. And originally, that scene used to be, is it still after he meets her on the beach, maybe? Yeah, so it was like, he's a little hot, and dive into the pool to cool down. And we said, hey, why don't you just jump on the raft? And then he gets on the raft, and we look at him on the raft. It's obviously Dustin Hoffman. So we grabbed our laptop, went onto YouTube, looked for the scene on YouTube, and then basically went and said, let's shoot, you know, we knew the sequence that we wanted, but we said, let's just shoot a version shot for shot, in case when we're in the editing room, we want to pay a direct homage. In the editing room, we did a version that was just shot for shot, The Graduate, and we just said, it's not as fun to do that. So then we thought, well, let's break it up with, you know, his memories of the girl, Carrie Bichet, who played Brooke, you know, swimming in the water.
Danny, have you ever been sitting in a movie theater and just thought, my God, that guy just ripped me off?
No, because I've done that. I'm more likely to rip them off, thinking, oh yeah, I'll use that. I'm far more likely to do that, to be absolutely honest. You know, and I have done a lot of that in my. I mean, like it was very sweet. The guy who introduced this award I've just got, Jay Fernandez, said that he was talking about Shallow Grave, and there's an image in Shallow Grave of when he goes into the loft space and there's all these lights coming through the ceiling, which is really cool, nice image, and he said how memorable it was. Well, that's stolen off the Coen brothers, to be absolutely honest. If you watch Blood Simple and the bullet holes through the wall, they've got those shafts of light. We just did it through there, you know. So, you know, you've got to be honest about where you steal from. It's a very noble act, especially when you own up to it, you know.
Have you ever owned up to it, to the actual filmmaker you've stolen from?
No, probably not. They point me in the direction of their lawyer, probably. So.
I sent him the script, and he said, well, I started reading, and it was great, but it was over in less than a page. And I really imparted on him that it was important that he play the role, that I couldn't imagine another human being playing it. And I told him what I still believe, which is he is the Wizard of Oz in this film. He is the man that we hear about the entire film and finally shows up. And there's no other voice that could carry that kind of gravity if you were going to receive something that meant the world until the moment you got it, and then you suddenly realize it meant nothing, that there's no better person could come from than Sam Elliott. And the reaction in the audience is always amazing. You see him and people go crazy. So I was just really, really grateful.
You know how many times I thought about this moment? Played out the conversation that you and I would have right here.
Really? What did you want to say?
You know, I don't remember.
That's all right. It happened to all of us.
But you have to have a lot of confidence to do a film in subtitles. Like Slumdog originally was written in English, the whole of it, but when we started working with the 7-year-old kids in it, whose section of the film is in Hindi, kids, although a lot of English is spoken in India, certainly kids don't really begin learning it until they're in their early teens. And so the kids were you could tell it was very fake when they were doing the English. So we changed it to Hindi. And it's also, I hate subtitles on films when they're at the bottom of the screen, because what you do is you just read the film, and occasionally you scan to the people, you know, especially if the girls are naked in French films, you look at the pictures. But otherwise you're reading the subtitles, and it's terrible that. So we just put them where you'd look in someone's eyes and then they spoke and then it would come up opposite their eyes, which felt like a natural scan, you know, for the eye to be doing like that. And so that's what we tried to do with it. And we coloured the background because there's so much colour in India. It's so vibrant that you just thought it feels natural to add that colour.
शुक्रिया जमाल।
The song in the closing credits, I was speaking at a university in St. Louis, and after Juno, I kind of got used to teenagers sending me songs to put in my film. But this was an unusual experience. As a man in his 50s who walked up to me and handed me a cassette tape. I needed to figure out where to listen to this song. And we went into a car with a cassette deck and we started listening, and you know, most of the stuff that I receive is not very good, and we were ready to make fun of it. And it played just like this. It was, you know, his voice came on and he started talking to me. Hello, Jason. That's strange. And I'm very proud to have that song because I think it's one of the few voices you hear speaking authentically about the idea of searching for purpose in the middle of your life.
How does it feel when life doesn't seem real and you're floating about on your own? Life seems uncertain, so you draw the curtain, pretending.
I love music, which you can probably tell, and on this, we got to work with this guy, A.R. Rahman, who, and those of you who know anything about Indian culture he is a mega star. It's just difficult to describe just how important he is to Indian film music. And Maya, who did the song Paper Planes, which I know you guys know from the trailer of Pineapple Express, but which is a real drag when I heard that, because it's a wonderful song and, you know, you want it to be just in your movie and nobody else's movie and all that kind of stuff anyway. But she is originally she's part London, part Sri Lankan. And she was a big fan of his growing up as a kid. And she wanted to work with him. So we got them together and they did, the song at the beginning and at the end is her singing along to one of Rahman's tracks as well, rapping to one of Rahman's tracks. You know, the music there is so much bolder. We tend to hide music in the West so that it works on you without you knowing what it's doing sometimes. But in Indian culture, it's much more, film culture, it's much bigger and kind of proud. The music is really proud and they mix it really loud and at the front of the mix, you know? And I love that about music because I'd like to do that all the time with music because I feel the same way about it as well.
Hi, my name is Berndt Mader. I'm a filmmaker and writer living in Austin, Texas, and I directed a film called The Printer. The inspiration for The Printer came as I was a grad student at the University of Texas at Austin. I'd be working late up at school, and if you worked past midnight, the printers at the printing press for the Daily Texan, which was the school newspaper, would come on, and it would just be this cacophony of sound in this bright halogen-lit room at night with this huge machinery running. It was really intimidating and impressive. And the story really revolves around this family who, you know, this couple who, this guy has health insurance, his wife is mentally ill, and he is potentially going to lose his job and therefore lose his insurance and not be able to take care of his wife. So that was those are like the stakes in the film, if you will, and it's all set in this print shop. And the film had a few influences, mostly of which were the films of Jean-Pierre and Luc Dardenne. I hope I'm not mispronouncing that. Those are the Dardenne brothers from Belgium. They had won a couple of Palme d'Ors at Cannes, and they have this very minimalistic, almost like, I want to call it a first-person style of shooting, where there's a lot of following of the character right behind his head, and a lot of like close-ups and whatnot. Coming up is my film, The Printer. I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for watching.
$11.56.
11.
$11.56.
Can you just fill half the prescription?
Kate. Kate? What happened? Come on.
One more.
Where the hell you been? You see them? You see who's here?
Who are they?
Trainees from Monroe. Machinists.
Here to take our jobs?
Here to take your job. I show up on time.
Morning.
Desk job.
Till the back gets better. Nice to be back at work, though. Miss me?
You see the new trainees?
Yeah. You worried?
Lame horse is the first to get shot.
At the track. I'll see their ass. They try to fire me.
See you around.